In this video, we'll look at how to change the mood of our Zombie Toys game by changing the lighting. Right now in our scene, we've got cool blues and purples lighting the scene, with their main light from the window coming in through the window grids apparently in a slightly warm orange yellow. We can do a lot with lighting in terms of changing the mood, both by adjusting the skybox and the other lights around. The skybox contributes our ambient light and will show up more prominently when we bake our lighting, as will the other lights. Right now in the corner of the room, we are seeing a bit of a light bleed here, as the lighting isn't baked. To change the lighting, we need to look at where the light is coming from and the color. This will drastically affect the mood of the game depending on how we alter it. What I'm going to start by doing is to pick that Nightmares Procedural skybox and darken down the sky tin. I'll bring it nearly down towards black, really reducing that ambient contribution. Also, I'll reduce the exposure down from 1.16 to 0.6, and this really darkens the room. Already we're seeing a radically different mood where that moonlight has become more prominent. Then I'll pick the directional light and change its color. When we take this light from a warm orange yellow to a cool blue, we get again a drastic shift in the mood. I'll go with blue and add a little more saturation in. Again, I'm using hues, saturation, and value here, as that's my preferred working method. If you'd like to work in red, green, and blue, you can click on the icon on the right middle of this color picker. Now this mood is drastically different. There's nothing really warm in the scene. Even the moonlight coming through is cool, and the scene is definitely darker and bluer. We can see the blue-purple point lights showing a little more prominently on the wall. What I'm going to do with them is to change their radii and their color. I've picked all four lights at once, and because they share common properties, those will show up in the inspector. Under the light component then, I'll adjust their range by clicking and dragging on the word range. I'm going to pull up their range and then play with their intensity. A little more range actually lights up more of the surfaces in the room, and so I'll click on the intensity and lower that down. We're seeing definitely a difference, where we've got a blue going on the stool here, overlaying on the silver and yellow, and then a definite purple on the legs. Just with some simple tweaks in range and color, we've changed the mood of the game radically, going from nicely lit with a good deal of ambient light to a much darker game. Lighting really affects the mood, as does the color of that game. What we see in the color of the game affects how we feel about it before any action happens. When we see a warm scene, we tend to feel happier. When we see a cool scene, we tend to feel sadder. And this applies even on a finer level when we're talking about highlights, midtones, and shadows. And that's a common grading scale in film and visual effects as well as games, a way to talk about color and light. When we start to change things like the shadow color, we can make the shadows inkier, darker, blacker, so that in our mind we've got additional enemies or monsters hiding in the shadows behind the dollhouse. We imagine them in because it's darker back there. Conversely, if we make our key light, in this case our directional, stronger and warmer, we'll feel better about things standing in that light. I'll give an example of this by leaving the point lights where they are and changing that directional light. Instead of going with blue, I'll shift back over towards a warm yellow. I'll put the hues somewhere in the 45 to 48 range and crank up that saturation. I'll also bring up value a bit, and what we can see here is we get a definite difference. I've returned these lights to a more complementary scheme, where I've got a warmer yellow light coming through, almost looking like a sun, and then I've got the cool blue in the scene. It is an odd mix, because we have a lot of normally associated with nighttime colors, such as blue and purple showing. What this also does then is actually make the game a little bit scarier. Because I've got blue in the shadows, we tend to feel fear, foreboding, that there's something uneasy troubling us out there, even though we can't put our finger on it. We feel better again about things that are in this warm light, and so the two together make us want to gravitate towards this warm grid. You can really change the mood of your game then, just by changing the color and intensity of the light, and then adding in other elements such as projectors for additional leaves or even somebody standing in a doorway. It's up to you where you'd like to go with the lighting. You could actually play this whole game as if the room was brightly lit by the sun or almost in complete darkness.